Now, if you've ever struggled with procrastination, you have probably read the books, you've watched the productivity videos, you probably have downloaded some productivity apps, and you probably have searched throughout the internet for the perfect system that will finally get you moving and get you unstuck. And you still haven't found it. And that's why you're watching this video. Now, I recently revisited a book called The More You Do, the Better You Feel. And it's by David Parker. And I read this probably 2 or 3 years ago. And I was hoping for some answers to help me to be more productive and also to help people with procrastination issues. Now, he's not a therapist and he doesn't know ACT or acceptance and commitment therapy, but I like a lot of his ideas. I think he really hit a lot of it on the head. He said that the habitual procrastinator is a person in conflict. On one hand, there is a strong desire to accomplish tasks, and on the other hand, an equally strong subconscious desire to avoid them. This inner conflict produces tremendous anxiety and feelings of guilt. Now, he's describing, without knowing it, what ACT calls experiential avoidance, meaning I'm avoiding this because it's going to bring up some internal conflict. But as I read this book, I eventually found myself asking a question. I was about 75% of the way through, and I was thinking, what if feeling better isn't actually the goal? What if that's where productivity advice and ACT kind of part ways? Because it's even in his title. The more you do, the better you feel. So the emphasis or the outcome that he's saying, hey, if you read this book, what you're going to get is you're going to feel better. And isn't that what we want to hear? We want the professionals, the gurus, the people that know how to accomplish this to say, hey, this outcome is what you're going to get. Feel better. But ACT really focuses not on the presence or absence of positive emotions or feeling better, but on living a meaningful life. Feeling better is not the end result. It's not the outcome. It's living better. That is what ACT teaches. Now, I don't want to diss David Parker. I'm sure he's got a really, really great message that he's getting out. And it probably works because there is a lot of components that ACT uses in his teaching, like behavioral activation, and instead of experiential avoidance, there is acceptance that you're not going to feel good while you do it. But by doing it, you're going to change your emotions. You're going to change your experiences. So I like a lot of his teaching. Now, I want you to think about the real problem here, and that's experiential avoidance. ACT teaches that much of human suffering comes from experiential avoidance. The more that you avoid it, the bigger and greater the feeling is. It's this paradox that says, if I get rid of this unwanted internal experience, I will feel better. I'll have more comfort, more peace, and I won't have to deal with all of that. But the paradox is actually the more you don't want it, the more you have it. In fact, the more you're pushing and resisting against it, the more it's pushing and trying to infiltrate your mind and heart. The more that you avoid, the smaller your life gets. The possibilities start to shrink. Your dreams have to fit in this smaller and smaller container. And the things that you're avoiding actually start to show up even more. Now, what are some of the things that we avoid? Well, David Parker uses the metaphor of the human ostrich. We bury our heads in the sands. And even if it's really important, we do things that are less important. We scroll social media, we check emails, watch YouTube, clean something that really isn't the priority. We're researching something, a neat new idea rather than the thing that is on our task list. We're thinking instead of acting and internalizing instead of externalizing. Now, Parker describes this process pretty vividly. He says, floating away from reality is the method by which the human ostrich escapes the pressure of the moment. Anything to avoid the task at hand. Now, the task remains, but we temporarily escape that discomfort. And that's why procrastination becomes such a powerful habit, because we learn that it works. and we're pragmatic. We do what works and we do more, or in this case, less of it, at least for a few minutes. And then the task is still there. We know that we have to do it. And then we're dealing with the guilt of, I should have done that and I didn't. Now, this is where ACT disagrees. Now, productivity advice, it often teaches that, if you take action, you're going to feel better. And there is some truth to that. ACT teaches that we take action because it matters, because there's something important here. Now, those sound similar, but they lead to very different lives. Imagine you clean the garage because you want to feel accomplished. Well, what happens if accomplishment doesn't show up? What if you don't get that bump? You think, man, this was wasted effort. I didn't get what I wanted. I'm going to be less likely to do that again. What if you end up cleaning the garage and now you feel more anxious because you realize how much more there's there to do, and you don't have the time or the capacity to do it? What if instead of feeling relief, you feel overwhelmed? Okay, if feeling better is the goal, then difficult emotions become evidence that something isn't working. Now, ACT says that maybe anxiety is still there. Maybe self-doubt is still there. Maybe there'll still be some feelings of being overwhelmed because there's a lot to do. Can you still move towards what matters, even if you don't get that result? It helps you to really think in a larger, more meaningful way, because we realize that the goal isn't to just feel better. The goal is to live better. We see that that garage being cleaned is part of the environment that we want to create, of peace. So peace might be the value. Now, if the goal is living better, feelings may happen or may not. And it often does. And if we take action, it often does lead to better feelings, but not always. It's always the byproduct, not the priority. As Stephen Hayes puts it, we cannot choose to have a life free of pain, but we can choose to connect our pain to a larger purpose, to make room for it, and to carry it with us as we move in the direction of our values. So there is some choice that we have, but it's whether or not we feel any discomfort or pain is not the point. What we do have a choice is to bring it with us, to create a life that's defined by our values. And I want to offer you a framework for this using the acronym HARD. So let's look at H. H stands for hooked by thoughts. So you sit down to begin and your mind immediately starts talking to you. I don't have the energy. I'll probably fail. This going to take way too long. It's going to take forever. I'm too far behind. Why even start? This doesn't matter. I'll start tomorrow. I mean, your mind is just chattering back and forth. Now, ACT calls this cognitive fusion, or being hooked by your thought. Now, fusion is two or more substances, and when you pour them together, they create one new substance. And we're kind of like that, where we get fused with our thoughts, meaning we see our life from those thoughts. And so the first part of that heart is we recognize we're hooked. These thoughts are just speaking to us, but we actually believe they are us. Diffusion means noticing these thoughts for what they are, just words and stories passing through, rather than letting them dictate our actions. These are not permanent things. These are things that come and go, like clouds in the sky. So the solution isn't arguing with your thoughts. If you just wait a minute, they're going to pass through and you'll have another thought. Instead, it's noticing them and actually calling this out when you're realizing that you're hooked. I'm noticing the thought that I'll fail. I'm noticing the thought that I'm not ready. Or I'm noticing the thought this is going to take forever. And that little bit of distance creates some freedom. The next part of the HARD acronym is A, avoiding discomfort. Now, this is probably the biggest one. Most procrastination is emotional avoidance. So ask yourself, what feeling am I unwilling to have right now? Because the answer is often more important than the task itself. So maybe you're avoiding anxiety, boredom, embarrassment, uncertainty, maybe a fear of failure or a fear of success. ACT teaches willingness. So it's not liking discomfort. It's not wanting discomfort, just making room for it. R is remoteness from values. Now, sometimes a task feels meaningless. You lose sight of why it matters. Laundry becomes laundry. In fact, that's all you can see is it's just a small task. There's no meaning to it. The paperwork becomes paperwork. Exercise becomes exercise. But what if there's a value there? What if laundry is actually caring for your family, caring for yourself? What if exercise is being present with your grandchildren or children that you can get down on the floor and wrestle with them? What if paperwork is supporting a career goal that also serves others? What if values are there? So we need to reconnect with our values. D is doubtful, or you could also say it's an overwhelming goal. Sometimes the goal is simply just too big, too far out. Write a book, clean the entire house, fix my life, start a business. Your brain sees the mountain and immediately shuts down. I can't go up that. I can't get around that. The solution is not a bigger push. The solution is actually a smaller step. And when that step is connected to your values, it becomes much easier to take. And this is where Parker brings one of his most useful ideas, and it's the JOT method. So JOT stands for just one task. And I love this idea because ACT isn't about taking some heroic action. It's about committed action. It's a small action, something that's flexible. You can move it around. You can change and adapt. And it's consistent action. Now, Parker writes, the secret to overcoming the paralysis of procrastination is to isolate a single task from the mountain of things that you need to do. Focus entirely on that one task and completely ignore everything else until it's finished. So instead of, write the book, you try opening the document. Just have it there, open. I can do that. Instead of clean the house, try wash 5 dishes or wash the silverware. I can do that. Instead of get healthy, try walk around the block during lunch. Okay, I can do that. Your mind will tell you the step is too small and when really what you need is some massive action. But ignore all that because momentum is built from those tiny actions. As you repeat them over time, you start to change your life. It's not giant bursts of motivation. It's those little things. So what does ACT teach that productivity advice often misses? Well, productivity advice says the more you do, the better you feel. And often that's true, but ACT teaches something even deeper. The more you move toward what matters, the richer life becomes. Some days you feel better, some days you won't. But either way, you're building a life that reflects your values. So the next time you find yourself procrastinating, don't ask, how do I get more motivation? Instead, ask, am I hooked by thoughts? Am I avoiding discomfort? Have I lost touch with my values? Is my goal overwhelming? Which part of hard is showing up right now? Then pick one small step, one tiny action, one jot, and move toward what matters. Not because you feel ready, but because your life is too important to spend waiting. Remember, your journey towards a more purposeful life begins with a single step.